Hello, it is Wednesday, June 28, 2023. This is Cancer Update 16. I'm at a park just near my house because between you and me, I was getting sick of looking at the same background in my videos, and I thought it would be nice to record somewhere else. It's also a beautiful day in Perth, and I wanted to show you how beautiful Perth can be because whilst we are mainly here to talk about cancer, I do also want you to know that Perth is a beautiful city. I'll just try and scoot around and show you what Perth looks like on a fine winter's day. You'll notice how blue the sky is and how green everything is. That is pretty much Perth. And bear in mind, this is the middle of winter. So whilst we do have rainy, stormy, windy days, we do have some beautiful, beautiful days in the middle of winter, and they are quite nice. I'm going to go and find a park bench to set the camera down, and then I'm going to talk about today's subject, which is a query that came in from one of the regular viewers. I believe their name is Angie, and they've asked what were the early symptoms that led up to my eventual diagnosis of pseudomyxoma peritoni. I'm just going to go and find somewhere to put the camera down, and we'll talk about that. So here we are. I'm set up on a park bench now. There's going to be some background noises. The West Australian birds, as you can hear, are making their normal selves be heard, and I've got some parents and children playing in the background. But this is life, and we are here to talk about life, and this is what life is like. So the question that came in from Angie was, what was the story leading up to my diagnosis of cancer? And I'd like to tell you that story. There is several factors I need to enlighten you with. So excuse me if I jump around a little bit here. The first one I want to talk about is my bowels, and the fact that my father had polyps. When he was alive, he was found to have polyps, which is a precancer in the large intestines, and that everyone in my family was aware of that. The way the Australian health system works, or one of the features, is when anyone turns 50 in Australia, the government mails them out a look. It's basically a cancer screening tool, and in effect, what you need to do is put some poop in a little container and send it back to an Australian government laboratory where they analyse it for any signs of cancer. So I turned 50 and I got that kit in the mail, and I gave my little fecal specimen, and it came back clear. And in the notes that you get with the results, it says your results are clear. However, this is not a gold standard. If you want a gold standard, then go and get a colonoscopy. And because my father had polyps, which meant I had somewhat of a family history with colon cancer, I said, okay, I want the gold standard. So I booked a colonoscopy in July 2022. So that's almost exactly a year ago now. And the results of that came back clear for all cancers. So there was no polyps. It did, however, list out that I had diverticulosis. And for those of you that don't know, diverticulosis is a condition of the large intestines where there is an outpouching. So if you have how am I going to show this? Your main lumen like that, you'll have a little pouch sit on the outside. I don't know if I've demonstrated that decently or not, but if you can just think of like your large intestine is like a tube, and you get these little sort of balloons that pop off the side. If that doesn't make sense, just Google diverticulosis and you'll find it. I should probably clear up at this point. There are two different terms, diverticulosis and diverticulitis. Just to quickly explain those, diverticulosis means you have diverticular, which means you have the pouches, and that's all it means. Diverticulitis means you have the pouches and there is something in there that has upset it, and it's all inflamed and angry and painful, okay? So there's two different terms. One means you've got it, the other means you've got it and it's upset. So I had my colonoscopy in July 2022. It came back negative for cancer, but positive for diverticular disease or diverticulosis. And I thought, okay, that's fine. That's great, actually. That that's news I really wanted to hear. And I went away pretty happy with that. Shortly afterwards, so this is would be only about August, September 2022, I started to get pain in my lower left quadrant and lower right quadrant, but mainly in my lower left quadrant. And the thought that went through my brain was, oh, that's the diverticulosis. Maybe it's slightly turned into diverticulitis at this point, and I didn't give it too much more thought. I just thought, this is how it's going to be. It's a 1 and at worst 2 out of 10 pain. I need to just get used to it because this is a chronic disease. It's not a particularly devastating disease, but it's one that I've got, and I need to learn to put up with it. And as a bit of foreshadowing, I don't think that pain was diverticulosis. So I went on with my life essentially at that point. I then, for various other reasons, unrelated reasons, I bought a motorbike. I used to own a motorbike back in the day. Oh, actually, no, there is a reason. I had a midlife crisis. That's what happened. I had a midlife crisis and I bought a motorbike. And as you would understand, when you ride a motorbike, you have to turn your neck a fair bit to the left and the right to check your blind spots and make sure that you don't hit anything and nothing hits you. And in doing so, I re-inflamed an old condition that I've had for decades, which is when I turn my head to the right, sometimes I get a shooting pain up the right-hand side of my neck. And it had always been manageable. But because I now owned a motorbike and I didn't own a car, and when I get that pain, my neck locks, and it then becomes very difficult for me to turn my neck, and that would be very dangerous when you're riding a motorbike to not be able to check your blind spots. I thought I'd better do something about this. So I went to my GP and I explained my situation, and she said, sure, no problem, Paul, I'll send you off for a CT scan of your cervical spine. So I went off and got the CT of my cervical spine, and it came back with some unexpected results. It came back saying my C4, C5 were fused, and there was occlusions, or the spinal nerve was being impinged on C4, C5, C5, C6, and C6, C7. So I took that back to the GP, and she said, Paul, this is interesting. You know, vertebrae don't self-fuse normally. I want to do some blood tests because I think you may have some form of arthritic disease. I said, okay, that's fine. So we did a blood test, and that came back positive for ankylosing spondylitis, which is a degenerative disease. Its other name is bamboo spine. And essentially what it does over time is that all of your vertebrae, instead of being, and forgive me if I get the number wrong, I think there's 32 of them, over time your 32 vertebrae turn into one long bone that is all calcified together. And the first part of that for me had been that C4, C5 had fused. So she gave me a drug at that time which was an anti-inflammatory called naproxen, and sent me on my way. I then went home and I cogitated on my situation, and I thought, oh, hang on, if my cervical spine have fused and I've got ankylosing spondylitis, I wonder what my thoracic and my lumbar spine are doing. So I went back to my GP and I said, could you please give me a CT referral for my thoracic and lumbar? She said, sure, no problem, I can see why that makes sense. So I went off and got that, and this is where the real story starts. The results for that came back, as they always do with CT, the radiology report reported on what it was told to report on. So it said, here is all the conditions with Paul's spinal column, and it described some issues that I have in my thoracic and lumbar spine, none of which were as bad as what was going on in my cervical area, by the way. But it said, incidental finding, large ascites. And I didn't give you a time for this. That was, I'll tell you what, I'll look it up and I'll put it down here. Whatever date is showing on the screen there, that's when I got that finding of large ascites. So I actually got a phone call from the GP. So they didn't wait for me to go back and get my results, they rang me and said, Paul, come in, we need to speak to you. So I went in and my doctor said, okay, Paul, we've got your CT results back and we need to stop worrying about your spine. We need to urgently find out what's going on with this ascites, because it can be caused by some very serious things. So I need to send you off for some more tests. And the first thing we need to do is a contrast, what was it? It was chest, abdomen, pelvis. I should have said before, the first CT scans were non-contrast. So that means there was nothing injected into my veins. It was just a CT scan. When we did the second one, it was a contrast CT. And essentially what that does is, well, it does what it describes. It creates more contrast. So you're able to see the blood vessels in particular with better contrast. And this is helpful when you're trying to do things like work out if someone's got cancer. So I went off for a full contrast CT scan, and that came back with a finding of, I forget the exact wording, but it said something along the lines of, this image is consistent with peritoneal carcinomatosis, further investigation recommended. And peritoneal carcinomatosis is an umbrella term for cancerous issues to do with the peritoneum. And as it turns out, they nailed it, because as the game progresses, you're going to find out they got it absolutely correct just from that CT. So I then got in contact with Fiona Stanley Hospital by that stage, and because we recognised that my belly was full with ascites and that I needed to get that drained. So I connected up with the fantastic people at Fiona Stanley Hospital. So if you're watching this, thank you very much. You were fantastic. And I know our journey's not through together. I'm going to be seeing you again, and I believe I'm going to be seeing you again soon. I want you to know that you did a great job. So I got myself down to Fiona Stanley Hospital, and we eventually got some ascites drained. The drainage journal is in the description field. I'm going to keep that drainage journal going forward. It's as much for me as for you. I need to keep a track of how much liquid has been drained out of me, and that's where I'm doing it so that you can see that information as well. And when they got that information out, they did a cystology examination. Just to quickly give you a little lesson on biology, cytology is cytology. Cytology is the study of cells. Histology is the study of tissues, which is lots of cells. So if they're looking at single cells, that's cytology. If they're looking at groups of cells formed into a tissue, that's histology. That's the difference between the two. Now, having pulled liquid, the ascites liquid out of my abdomen, that's a cytology situation, not histology, because there's no tissue. It's not held in a fabric. It's liquid. So I got the cytology results back, and it suggested that it was malignant, and it was suggestive of pseudomyxoma peritoni. I also had some blood tests done at about that time, and one of the blood tests is called CA19-9. If you want to know more about it, there is some stuff in the description below that will talk you through CA19-9. There's one of the links to a playlist that I've made, or you can just Google CA19-9. But effectively, it's a cancer marker. Just to explain what's happened, there's a primary school busload of kids that have just turned up here at the park. I've decided I'm going to keep filming though, because part of what I am certainly having to learn right now, and what I'd express to you, is the life and the world goes on without you. So what's happening now is, in a perfect world, I wouldn't have this background noise, but I don't live in a perfect world. So I'm deliberately going to film this because it's not perfect. So where I got up to was talking about my CA19-9. The score I got for that was 3,900. And I forget the exact brackets, but I do remember that anything over 100 means that you have abdominal cancer that has metastasized. And I misunderstood the word metastases at that point, so I'll just explain it for you, because then you can be more educated now than I was at that point. I always thought metastasized cancer had to go through the lymph nodes, I thought you got a primary, it then went to your lymph nodes, and then you got metastases. I now know that that's sometimes the case, that can be the way that it happens, but it's not necessarily. There are several parts of the body where it doesn't have to happen that way, and the abdomen is one of the best examples. When you get cancer within the abdominal cavity or the peritoneum, so that's from basically the base of your sternum, or the bottom of your diaphragm is exactly where it is, to the bottom of your abdomen, so just above your genitals. Any cancer that gets into that area can metastasize simply by being in the same bag as everything else. So there's no lymph nodes in there. You would simply have a cancerous cell that might pop off your colon and might connect to your spleen, and it will just transfer that way. It just does it simply by travelling in the fluid that's in there. And speaking of the fluid that's in there, there's not meant to be any fluid in there. The correct amount of ascites is 0 millilitres. So in my case, what happened was I had an appendiceal cancer. I didn't know about it at this stage, but that's what I had. And the appendiceal cancer had, appendiceal tumour, I should say, and that had silently popped, which is what all appendiceal tumours do. They silently pop, and they're creating ascites. And the ascites works like a fluid that just washes that tumour all the way around your abdominal cavity. So that means, in effect, that those tumorous cells are getting pushed to just everywhere in your abdomen, and they can show up on any one of your abdominal organs. So be it liver, kidney, stomach, duodenum, spleen, pancreas, any of them. It can show up anywhere, and it just gets washed around, and wherever the tumour cell lands is wherever it lands. So that could be quite unfortunate. So when I found out I had a CA 19-9 score of 3900, alarm bells started going off for the staff at Fiona Stanley. And if you go back and watch Cancer Update #1, and then to understand Cancer Update 1, you'll need to watch How to Magnetise a Screwdriver. That was when that happened. So if you want the date for when that happened, just have a look at when those videos were recorded. So having a CA 19-9 of 3900 was ringing alarm bells for everyone at Fiona Stanley. They were being calm, as they should, with me, but they recommended that I go and get a PET scan, which is what I did. The PET scan, and this is in one of the cancer updates in my back catalogue, I forget the number, I'll post the number down in the description below. But basically my esophagus and stomach came up as needing further attention, and my ascending colon came up as needing more attention. After further investigation, the esophagus and the stomach turned out to be stomach acid. Now, do you remember way back in the story, I told you that I got put onto naproxen which is an anti-inflammatory, and I was put onto that for my neck. It turns out that one of the side effects of naproxen is it generates a whole heap of stomach acid. And what had happened is, completely by coincidence, in the months leading up to that PET scan, or maybe only the 1 month leading up to that PET scan, I'd just gone onto a drug that was increasing my stomach acid, and my stomach had got upset, and that had showed up on the PET scan. So my esophagus and stomach turned out to be no big deal. I just had to stop taking naproxen and start taking basically something to reduce my stomach acid, and now my reflux issues are completely gone away. So I'm neither on naproxen nor on the anti-stomach acid drug that I went on for a short while. So that is now resolved, although I would, if I went riding my motorbike, stand a possibility of getting that trouble with my neck. The issue around the ascending colon was resolved by having another colonoscopy. They found three sessile precancerous lesions, but they were precancerous, and there was no big deal. And we knew that they were less than a year old, because remember, I'd had a colonoscopy 11 months beforehand, and they found nothing. So we knew they were less than a year old. We had them biopsied anyway, and they came back as precancerous, so no big deal. This was actually quite a problem for me, because if I didn't have esophageal, stomach or colon cancer, that meant I probably had peritoneal cancer. And actually, now that I look back, I could have predicted it now that I know what I know. The trouble is, though, this is a 1 in a million cancer. So, and the state of Western Australia has, I'll put the exact figure right here, right now. I'm guessing the number under my finger now is somewhere between 2 and 3 million. I think there's between 2 and 3 million people in the whole state of Western Australia, which means there are 2 or 3 people that have the cancer that I got every year in this state, which means the chance of one doctor or one general doctor, one non-specialist, seeing it more than once in their life is actually vanishingly rare, which means almost everyone I deal with is meeting my cancer type for the first time. So you can forgive them for realising that in all likelihood I had pseudomyxoma peritoni so late in the piece. And by so late in the piece, I would say, now that I know what I know, we probably only would have worked it out about 2 weeks earlier. So it's actually no big deal. So what ended up happening was I was recommended to a pseudomyxoma peritoni specialist up at Joondalup Health Campus. And when I went and saw him, he immediately knew what I had, and he immediately knew the course of action that he needed to take to assess and hopefully treat me. So what he did was he gave me a laparoscopy at the same time as an ascites drain. He got out an amazing 7 litres of ascites, and he got enough information from the laparoscope to rate my PCI, which is my peritoneal cancer index, as being 39 out of 39, which means I had PMP everywhere to the full extent. So that 39 means in all 13 regions, I had it rated as 3 out of 3, and 13 times 3 is 39, which gives you your final index value. So that means, in effect, that I was riddled with precancer. The tumorous, the mucinous tumours had gone everywhere. And that specialist then said, "I'm sorry, Paul, I can't give you the operation that I was expecting to be able to offer to you. You're, at this stage, too laden with the tumour. What I can do is I can recommend you to go to a chemotherapist, and when that chemotherapist has got your PCI score lower, then we can look at re-examining you, and if your PCI score is low enough, then I can offer you some treatment." So that brings you up to last Friday, only 5 days ago. So you're now brought up to speed to about Cancer Update 14, I think. So so that's pretty much where I'm at. Since then I've had a psychology booking and a psychologist booking, and I've got an appointment to go and see the oncologist next Thursday, 4th of July. So I know those of you in the US will be able to remember that date. I'm seeing the oncologist on the 4th of July. So I'll have more information then. And just to recap, I have essentially 3 courses of action that I can go down. One is chemotherapy to get my PCI score down, then back to the PMP specialist to have a surgery called CRS and HIPEC, and then hoping that I have some quality of life after that. The second course of action I can do is to go on to palliative chemotherapy, and the third course of action I can go on to is to do nothing other than therapeutic ascites drains and just wait for one of my precancerous abdominal organs to turn into cancer. And then once that cancer has formed, then it will be time to discuss end-of-life situations. Because, for example, once pancreatic cancer, for example, kills you and kills you fast. So if I end up with pancreatic cancer, it'll be time to punch out pretty quickly. There's other cancers that are much slower. I know the pancreas, for example, is probably the most rapid at killing you, but there's certainly some that are slower. So that brings you up to date. So, Ange, I hope that answers your question, and I hope you've, as much as you can, that you've enjoyed this update. and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for staying with me on the journey. I am enjoying your comments. Please keep them coming. I am feeling a lot of love from you. It is helping me. So please keep it up. Some of you have made comments on just ignore the trolls. I want you to know that people that mind don't matter to me, and the people that matter don't mind. So I'm okay with it. I am strong in that regard. But part of the reason I'm strong is you, because you have told me to ignore them, and that they really are the problem, not me. And you have helped me by saying that to me, because I think everyone has their internal doubts, and of course I have my internal doubts as well. And when you have an avalanche of people saying, Paul, ignore it, don't worry about it, it does really help. So thank you very much. I'll sign off here. I will just wander around the park and do take some footage for you, so you can see what a lovely day it is in Perth and what a lovely city this is. Okay? Enjoy the show. Just letting you know that I was asked by the teacher that was in charge of those kids to not film children. This is something that has happened in Western Australia recently, and it is absolutely fair enough, and I have deleted that footage and I won't use it. So really I'm just showing you the very small corner of the park where the kids aren't at the moment, because this is where it's safe to film. But anyway, this is Perth, and this is the middle of winter. I'll post up the weather for today, and for you Americans, I'll even do it in Fahrenheit. How's that? Even though I'm a big fan of the metric system, I'll post it up in Fahrenheit and metric. And if you ever want to come to Perth, please give it some thought. Thanks for watching my update. See you later. Hello, boy. Hello. Hello. Hey, how are you? You're gorgeous.